As off-season reports continue to circulate, the off-season is officially underway. The Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, speculation is going crazy. But this new report from Dan Graziano of ESPN, he was at the Super Bowl, got a bunch of details. It sounds like the Vikings are going to try to work to add Kirk Cousins first. And then if they can't, they'll work on Danielle Hunter. So Danielle's contract extension, because he's a free agent this summer, is on hold until they figure out what is going to happen with Kirk Cousins. Number one, if I'm a player, I do not like the message that's being sent to me and my agent. Because what that is telling me and my agent is that I'm not the most wanted player for this organization. A 36-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles who's won one playoff game in 6 years with the organization is more valuable to you than a pass-rushing defensive end in his prime coming off a season with 16 and a half sacks. I'm not saying I'm saying that, but that's what the agent and Danielle Hunter are thinking. That's their perspective. And to be honest, I think it's a very fair perspective. Why wouldn't they think that? Which player does not want to be valued in the NFL? And Danielle Hunter, he's being put on the back burner because the Vikings can't figure out what's going on with Kirk Cousins. And it sounds like, according to Graziano, the Chicago Bears could come calling, and they've got a lot of money to do so, for another defensive end. They traded for Sweat from the Washington Commanders last year, and he immediately boosted the Chicago Bears defense. Now, if they bring in Danielle Hunter with Sweat, the Chicago Bears might be looking at the best defense, not only in the NFC North, but perhaps a top 5 defense in the NFL. So, if you're the Bears, this is the best news you've seen all day, because this allows you, or gives you the opportunity to put two elite pass rushers next to each other or opposite each other, however you want to do it. Defensive coordinators like to be creative on the defensive line. But analyzing this from a Minnesota Vikings podcast perspective, should the Minnesota Vikings want to re-sign Danielle Hunter to a 4 or 5 year deal worth lots of money, whatever defensive ends make, 35, 40, 45 million guaranteed? Danielle Hunter had one of his best seasons ever in a Vikings uniform this past year. 16 and a half sacks. He had 54 solo tackles, 83 combo tackles, tackles for loss 23, assist tackles 29. He had an amazing year in a contract season. The year before, he played the same amount of games, and he had 10 and a half sacks. The year before, he played 7 games. That's when he had the back surgery. He had 6 sacks. In each full season, for the last 4 years, he has had double-digit sack numbers. In 2018, he had 14 and a half sacks. Same in 2019. 2021 was a shortened season. He had 6 sacks in 7 games. Most likely going to be on pace for double-digit sacks. 2022 and 2023, he had 10 and a half and 16 and a half sacks. This guy is a sack monster. But you need to consider the age that Danielle Hunter is at this point in his career. He is 29 years old right now. And pass rushers that is a position, much like the running back position, where you can be an elite pass rusher, and then you could just fall off the face of the earth, and you can still contribute and be a contributing player to an elite team in the NFL and get a sack here and get a sack there. But they can also rack up all this guaranteed money for production that's not worth the amount of money that you're paying him. I look at Von Miller, for example. 29 years old, he had 14 and a half sacks. Danielle Hunter had 16 and a half. The following year, in 2019, Von Miller had 8 sacks. Then he missed the season with an injury in 2020. And in 2021, he had 9.5 sacks. Still a very contributing player for NFL rosters. But it's not the $45, $50 million guarantee that Danielle Hunter would receive. For Buffalo, he had 8 sacks in 2022. And this season, he put up a big goose egg. 0 sacks. Let's take a look at Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack, one of the great pass rushers for the Oakland Raiders. Then he got traded to the Chicago Bears. Then he got traded to the Los Angeles Chargers. 2020, when he was 29 years old, just like Danielle Hunter was this year for the Vikings or last year. 2020, he had 9 sacks. 2021, he had 6. 2022, he had 8. Then he came out of nowhere this past year and had 17 sacks in 2023. So he had a phenomenal year this year. But the question is, if Danielle Hunter drops off and goes from 16 and a half sacks to 8.5, 9.5 sacks, is he worth the guaranteed money that the Minnesota Vikings would give him if they re-signed him this offseason? Now, he's a very valuable player, very explosive, gets at the quarterback. I think it'd be a wise decision to bring him back for 2 years. But you need to be careful with this deal, because what you don't want to do is pay him all this guaranteed money for 4 years and he has 1 or 2 years of production. Then you're paying off 2 years of crap to a player that isn't producing at the level that you're paying him. You have to be very careful when you re-sign players that are 29 years old, because the NFL life is so short. Players get hurt and drop off so quickly in the NFL because it's such a physical game. So right now, if you told me the Vikings didn't re-sign Danielle Hunter, I wouldn't say it's the end of the world. I would be more concerned if he's a 25, 26-year-old player. But he's almost 30. And you have to be careful with guaranteed money for any NFL player that's not a quarterback that's past the age of 30. Because the Minnesota Vikings could quickly regret that decision. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, review, and follow the podcast wherever you're currently listening to this podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.